Dear investment professionals, financial analysts, business partners, dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome because tonight we gather to celebrate the 65th edition of the award for Best Financial Communication. As you know, this award recognizes Belgian-listed companies that excel in both financial, but also in non-financial communication, as evaluated by your peers and colleagues, the financial analyst community across Europe. Not only are we celebrating the 65th edition of these awards, but it's also the 20th year that our dearest colleague Luc van der Elst has coordinated the awards survey. Thank you. Not for me, but for Luc. Il faut le faire. Il faut être honnête. Luc van der Elst has coordinated the awards survey, each time with sufficient energy, a lot of energy, knowing that each time something goes wrong somewhere every year and it needs to be fixed before we have the award and the award celebration on time. What is more as well is that it is the first edition that we celebrate under the name of EFFAS Benelux. Donc, on n'a plus l'Association Belge des Analystes Financiers, de Belgische Vereniging voor Financiële Analisten, but we changed the name into EFFAS Benelux. As you will have read, above BVFA rebranded as EFFAS Benelux this summer 2025, also expanding our activities to the Netherlands and Luxembourg. So it's not simply the name, there is a lot of activity going on. And as you know, we are a member of EFFAS, the European Federation for Investment Professionals. I no longer say the European Federation of Financial Analyst Societies, because we are more than just financial analysts. We are looking at the different type of, let's say, investment professionals. EFFAS brings across national societies that share the same vision across Europe and beyond. There was currently no local EFFAS member society in the Netherlands and in the Luxembourg, Grand Duchy de Luxembourg. This expansion enables us to serve the important community of investment professionals in these neighboring countries, connecting finance professionals across Europe. With the name EFFAS Benelux, we reaffirm our proud membership of EFFAS and emphasize the importance of our European network. Our mission, ladies and gentlemen, remains to raise professional standards and increase transparency in financial and non-financial communication, reporting, and valuation for investment professionals. You know that above EFFAS Benelux and EFFAS International has been very, very active into sustainability reporting, ESG reporting, financial analysis. I know that with the omnibus regulation, a lot of things are changing, but still the problem has not, let's say, disappeared. It's still there. So another milestone is the recent launch of our new training program, the European Climate Risk Analyst, ECRA. While your certified ESG analyst CESGA program equips students to integrate ESG factors at portfolio level, ECRA goes deeper into the science, financial modeling, and systemic implications of climate change. It's a practical program that teaches you how to integrate climate-related risks into your investment analysis. And of course, as every year, you're all warm-heartedly welcomed to have a look at this program in more detail. Before I give the floor to Mick van den Houwen, and he told me I could say Mick, so let's do that, CFO of VDP. He is our host, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Norbert Pat and Alexander Makar and the rest of the VDP team for organizing and hosting this event together with us. It's fabulous. Thank you very much for that. And of course, also special thanks goes out to all the analysts who, like every year, helped us with this award, to the EFFAS Benelux board and team for their contribution efforts, to the management of Belier and Fabelfin Academy for their support, to the representatives of all the listed companies, all those with whom we work closely and will continue to do so in the future. Thank you very much. it's time for me to shut up and give the word to Mick. Mick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hans, and also congrats to EFFAS creation and also to Luc for the long-standing support and analysis. I would like to welcome you on behalf of WDP and our team to be here tonight. For those who still remember, it's the second time we organized the event, and last time we were upstairs and still in the renovation works of this part of the building. So we are very happy that we can welcome you here all in our event launch. So now at WDP, we really value the Best Financial Communication Award and the survey. Why? Because it keeps us all sharp and it raises the bar and it advocates good, qualitative and timely financial communication, and that's what we stand for. And let's say it pushes us every year. We try to learn and improve each year. What rests us is to wish you a very enjoyable evening, and we are all looking forward to and curious on who will take home the famous vase, and so looking forward to the ceremony, and we would like to welcome you afterwards for a reception. Thank you and enjoy your evening.
Okay, here we go. I would like to invite Luc Neuberg for a short speech on our new collaboration. I mentioned that we have a collaboration with Luxembourg. So Luc Neuberg, PhD, is a founding partner of Fair Cost Index. He is also the chairman of the board of ALRIM, the Luxembourg Association for Risk Management, and the president of GFR, Global Fund Risk Association. This evening, before you were here, we signed a contract, collaboration contract between EFFAS Benelux and GFR. Luc is a member of the advisory committees of the CSSF and a member of the technical committee of ESMA. In the past, he was CEO, head of risk management, as well as board member of diverse investment fund management companies and investment funds. He teaches risk management courses at universities and for professional training institutes. Luc has published numerous articles in peer-reviewed journals and is a co-author of the book Risk Management for Investment Funds, published by McGraw-Hill in 2023. Luc, the floor is yours.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you so much. Good evening. I'm really pleased to be there. Thank you for the invitation and great for the cooperation. I will try to do my best to stay in some minutes, if it works. Yes. Okay. After 2 hours, you cut my micro, but I will try to stay in 10 minutes. First of all, as an introduction, I'd like to show you the situation of the investment funds market in Europe. Okay, a lot of numbers, but here the idea is just to show you that, okay, Luxembourg is the first place in Europe for domiciliation of investment funds. We are close to 6 trillion of asset under management for regulated funds, because otherwise we are above 7.5 trillion. This has been said, Luxembourg is also the second place in the world for investment funds domiciliation. I should say first place in the world after US. But anyway, and the first place also for cross-domiciliation, for cross-border distribution. Why am I saying that? It's because I will come back directly on GFR, but because of the size of the financial place in Luxembourg for investment funds, we do get a great argument. The great argument, this is the legitimacy in risk management. Risk management is well developed in Luxembourg since years and years. As previously said, I have the honor to be the president of ALRIM, the Luxembourg Association of Risk Management, and previously, 10 years ago, it was Marcos Vick, and Marcos Vick is also now director at the CSSF, the regulator in Luxembourg for investment funds. This is important. It shows also that we have a great support for the regulation and risk management. We all know that nowadays, crisis after crisis becomes a really important topic. But let's go on GFR. And what's the idea of GFR? GFR, Global Fund Risk, is a new non-profit association. And this is the idea of GFR was to construct something which was missing. Maybe some of you knows the GARP. The GARP is the Global Association of Risk Professionals. And GARP is mainly driven for bankers and for risk managers. So nothing was done for investment funds. And GFR, the purpose of GFR is to get an association of risk management, not risk managers, but global and dedicated to investment funds. So we launched that association 2 years ago, and the mission of GFR is simple. This is to improve the culture of risk management in the investment funds industry. You know that the investment funds now represent the second vehicle of financial intermediation. The idea is to avoid some problem that we face with banks. I'm not just thinking about Lehman, I'm thinking about Silicon Valley Bank, Credit Suisse, and I will not give you the name of the next one. So the investment funds industry is amazingly increasing, and the idea of GFR is to improve again the culture of risk management in that area. For doing this, in fact, the first stage, because we do propose a certification, was to write a book that was not existing. So we published a book 2 years ago, Risk Management for Investment Funds. What is interesting to notice that that book was published by McGraw-Hill. McGraw-Hill is one of the biggest editors in the world, in US. And the reason they did accept is also the legitimacy regarding the risk management. And another point to notice, first of all, the book was not existing. The second author of the book is François Petit, who is working at CSSF, the regulator in Luxembourg. The third one is an academic, a German guy, an academic, but also is board member of different funds in Luxembourg. The last one is an expert, as I am. And the idea was to integrate in that reference book the academic point of view, the regulation point of view, and the expertise, to provide what we say the second title, a practical guide for European investment funds. Once the book was published, and we had a great support, notably by Philippe Jorion. Philippe Jorion wrote the reference book of the GARP. Philippe left us some months ago, but he was with us even for the creation of GFR. We had Marty Subramaniam, another academic in New York University, Tanguy van der Werf, that you all know, who is president of EFFAMA, and notably Michael Roberge. Michael Roberge is the president and CEO of MFS, Massachusetts Fund Services. Why Michael Roberge? Massachusetts Fund Services launched the first open-end fund 1 century ago. That fund still exists. It's amazing. 1 century ago. And the reason that fund exists is a huge focus on risk management. What about the certification? First of all, we have a simple exam, a multiple choice exam. So main part of the people are learning by themselves. We do provide also some support courses, but no, it's an option. That exam covers all topics in risk management. So again, this is not risk managers, this is risk management. I will come back directly on this. The exam is fully based on the reference book. Obviously, the book is updated. We are working on the second edition. So we are working because there are some updates. For instance, in the second edition, we will get a chapter on geopolitical risk, more on sustainable risk, all the updates. The exam is open to students, graduate, professional. We have some agreement with some business school. For instance, some student of the Bocconi already passed the exam. We have also some discussion with the McGill University in Canada, with the London School of Economics, with HEC Paris, etc. The idea is also to provide the ability for students to get directly a certification which is already recognized. The GFR certification is fully supported by the regulator. And the introduction of the book was written by Marcos Wick himself, so director at the CSSF. So we already had, it's only 2 years old, so it's a new association, but we already had some session in Boston, in US, in Luxembourg, of course, in Milano. In Saturday, we will get a session in Milan. We had also some session in Paris, Luxembourg, of course, and for 2026, we will get some session in Tokyo, also in, I hope, in Brussels, depends on you, and some session also in UK. If you have a view on the members, as I said, this is a certification. GFI is dedicated in risk management, meaning that risk management, as you may know, concern every player in the fund industry. Every player starting from investor to regulator. And it's interesting to notice that those who already passed the exam, well, we have only 25% of risk manager. The rest come from all the industry, from legal counsel, regulator, fund admin, back office, front office. It's really interesting because, again, crisis after crisis, we observe, of course, some board members, some executives, we observe that the risk management is a huge topic for all players and not only for risk managers. All information, of course, is available on our website. Again, I hope that with you we'll be exploring and continue to progress and to propose those kind of certification, the courses in Luxembourg as well for EFFAS. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luc, because risk is at the essence and it will stay at the essence. I would like now to introduce our keynote speaker, Jan Longeval, and discussing the falling of the democratic cliff, why it all matters to all of us. Jan is going to give his speech. No questions, please, but we will make sure that there is a possibility to have a Q&A at the end of the speech. I think that is going to be better. It's tough to introduce Jan Longeval because I think most of the people know him anyway. So Jan Longeval is adjunct professor at Vlerick Business School, and he is a writer of a number of very interesting books, which I have read partly, not all of them, Jan, apologies. He was also board member of our Belgian Association of Financial Analysts, and it was always interesting because if Jan was there, we could be sure that we would have a very interesting intellectual discussion. He's professor for portfolio management and theory at the CEFA course, but tonight he will give the keynote about the impact of demography on economic growth.
Thank you very much for that introduction. It was way too kind. So I'd also to extend a word of thanks to the board members of ADAF. used to be board members. It's emotional for 4 years, but then I had to let go. You should know that there are 12 board meetings a year, which are duly prepared by the whole team. You are paid nothing to do so. There's also a lot of work for tonight's ceremony, so I would like to extend my gratitude for all this hard work that you're doing for free, because you're all convinced and in your hearts good analysts. Being a former analyst myself, I always have reserved a special place for analysts, and I still continue to do so because my books that you partially read and then you fell asleep, I imagine, I tend to delve deep into research so I can relive my days as an analyst way back in the day in 1996 at Bank de Grove. Okay, that's enough for the introduction. Tonight I'm going to entertain you with one of my favorite topics over the past couple of years. It's about demographics. And demographics are a great thing because if you're, I'm also an economist, as many of you also, as I imagine. Well, you know where the word economist comes from? It's economy plus mist is economist. And so they make all these forecasts, and very often the future is very, very unpredictable. They are wrong. But with demographics, even though there's always some degree of uncertainty, you can make quite reliable forecasts in the long run. And so that's what I like about the demographics, is that you have some solid perspective on long-term trends. Now, I hope I'm going to do this right. So it's a very simple structure. There's no sequence. We're going to talk about demographic collapse. I'm going to explain why you're all wrong, thinking that there are too many of us in the world. And so I'll show many statistics. I don't like opinions. All people are entitled to opinions. I prefer data and statistics to opinions, because data and statistics then allow you to build an opinion. But you don't start by having opinions. And then as we are in analyst setting, financial setting, also the relevance of these demographic trends on the economy and investing. Demographic collapse, I think that most of us have been living in a world where the most popular narrative is that of the Club of Rome. It was a club of scientists and pseudoscientists that came together back in the 1970s. They published a very famous book called The Limits to Growth. Basically, has been the case across the whole human history, forecasting that within 20 or 30 years, the Earth would run out of resources and would all die because of famine and what have you. Now, obviously, I don't know whether there's a pointer on this thing. Is there a pointer? No, that's okay. Yeah, so what are the two? Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. My kind of man. If you look at the top left graph, you can see that for most of human history, there was nearly no growth in the number of people living on Earth. For even certain periods of time, we estimate that the number of people worldwide was less than 20,000. So the fact that you and I are here tonight briefing and enjoying the evening, I hope, is in fact you are very, 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 very lucky. The Earth is 4.3 billion years old, and we estimate that about 99.99% of all living species that ever lived, that ever walked the Earth, have died out. We tend to see ourselves as very important, but if you would read, my favorite book of all time is by Bill Bryson. It's called A Short History of Nearly Everything. He visualizes human history by extending his arms. And if from my left finger to my right-hand finger is the age of the Earth, so 4.3 billion years, in fact, humanity is about the white edge of my fingernail. That's about how long that humans have been around. And so we're just an anecdote in all of history. Now you can see on the graph that since 1850, the second industrial revolution, we've seen a very strong acceleration in the growth rate of the global population. Now, indeed, the Club of Rome is right, is that exponential growth, like we have seen over the past, let's say 170 years, is unsustainable. Even a exponential growth rate of 0.01% in the global population is unsustainable, because at some point in time, I think you're all a bit into mathematics and whatever, statistics, there will be some point in time where the number of humans will exceed the number of atoms in the universe. So exponential growth rates, by definition, are not only undesirable at some point, but also in the long run very, very, well, just an impossibility. Now, why did it increase so rapidly? It was to do with public health, vaccination. A long time ago, well, not so long time ago, people used to have about 5 children in each family. But why did they have 5 children? Because 2 or 3 were dead by the age of 20. And so, with this improvement in public health, we managed to keep our children alive. So this is what explains better living conditions, this dramatic increase in the global population that indeed is unsustainable. But now let's look at some numbers. It's a fantastic website. It's free information on the internet. You can find it's the United Nations World Population Prospect. So I took on some graphs that I found over there. And if you look at this image, you can see indeed there are now today about 8 billion people in the world. The global population is going to continue to grow. We're going to reach about 10 billion people, 10.3. You should also know that these forecasts 5 or 10 years ago were forecasting 12 to 13 billion people, but they are being revised downwards all the time. You can see it's plus 2 billion people by the end of the century. Now, as we're all, well, some of our analysts, let's dig into these numbers and to see what you find when you look underneath the hood of this statistic. Now, if you look just at the forecast for the population in Sub-Saharan Africa, you can see that there the United Nations is counting on a growth of 2.2 billion. Now, you don't need to have a higher degree in mathematics to know that if it's plus 2 at the global level and plus 2.2 in Sub-Saharan Africa, it means that on a net basis and all other parts of the world, there's going to be no more growth in the global population. Interesting. Even more interesting if you go and look at certain regions or certain countries. Now, this is not a surprise to most of you, I imagine, because we all know that in Japan, there's a very low fertility rate, so fertility rate, the number of live births per woman. It's called, in demographics, it's called the replacement rate. To sustain the population at the same number, every woman needs to have to give birth to 2.1 children. Japan is about at 1.3. And so at 1.3, it's mathematical. There's no immigration. Japanese, they are very, very close to immigration, so they don't like immigration. They call them gaji, which is very, another very positive term. It's also been a very close society. So with no immigration to make up for their own birth deficit, you can see over the past 15 years, every day that goes by, there are less Japanese than the day before. Okay? And so this, I imagine, most of you already knew. Now, more surprising and closer to home, I'm going to take a sip of water. Closer to home, look at our big neighbor Germany. You have all this immigration after the war, or during the war in Syria. So you could expect that normally you could see a positive trend in the evolution of the German population. But you can see over the past 15 years, in fact, population growth has been stagnating, and now we are now at a turning point in history, because in most countries are going to see that where we have been used to over the past 30, 50 years of seeing this very strong growth in our populations, we're now beyond the tipping point, and we're now going to go into a very long period of a declining population. And that's going to change everything. Even more surprising is Italy. I was surprised when I found these numbers. You can see that there the forecasts are that the population is going to be cut in half by the end of this century. So this cliché of la mamma nella cucina con 5 bambini, that's making spaghetti carbonara, it's something of the past long time gone. Today, the actual fertility rate in Italy is among the lowest in Europe. You should also know that some consider these statistics of the UN, these forecasts, to be very optimistic, because they are counting on a slight recovery in the fertility rate. There are other demographics. The demographics are saying, well, this is an assumption. We think that in documented history, there's been nearly never observed to see a recovery in the birth rate, because at some point in time, when you fall below a certain fertility rate, well, society at large starts to reorganize itself for a society with fewer children. So to go back to where you came from is a very hard thing to do. Now, this is getting a bit old, but these are numbers that you could find in the Lancet a couple of years ago. And I'm sure if they would have been updated today, it would be even more dramatic. You can see some numbers for the expected evolution of the population in Western Europe. Okay? Now, there are 3 exceptions to the demographic collapse. That is Belgium, yes, Sweden, and France, thanks to net immigration. So we still have net immigration, and that makes up for the birth deficit that we have in our own populations. Now, if you look, there are 2 scenarios. You have the reference scenario, which is already quite dramatic, I think, from a certain point of view. Now, I know that's an opinion. Some people say, well, too many of us, and so they say, well, if it's going down by half, that's a great thing, okay? That's your opinion, that's fine. I think this, for me, is a rather sad picture. To see a population cut in half, as would be the case in the whole of Southern Europe. If we manage to obtain the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs of the United Nations, this would mean even less net immigration, so the numbers would even be more negative. You could see like minus 60% in Southern Europe. And so, just looking at these numbers, it may be the case that there are too many of us, but if we continue in this way, having these very low fertility rates, it may very well be the case that in the long run we might have a problem of a totally different nature, that there would be too few of us. China, as you all know, they had the one-child policy introduced back in the 1950s, late 50s, 1960s, when the fertility rate was 5.4, so indeed unsustainably high. It's been so successful in this policy that today they are facing a very different problem. Also, many baby girls have been killed over the past 50 years, because if you have one child in their culture, it's better to have a boy. And so there's an excess of Chinese men, young men today, that are unable to find a partner who's not helping either. Now, as Mark Twain once said, there are lies, damned lies, and statistics. I would say there are lies, damned lies, statistics, and Chinese statistics. Because Chinese statistics tend to be quite unreliable. And I am sorry to say so, but that's quite true. So there are other numbers out there arguing that based on certain consumption patterns, already today, the true number is 200 million Chinese below the official number. Now, the Chinese government is quite aware of this issue. You can see now, I think that 2 years ago was the first year that the officials admitted that the population is declining, but you are falling off a demographic cliff. And so if it's 1.4 billion Chinese today, by the end of the century, it would go down by nearly half to 790 million people. Now, China, over the past 20 years, was good for about 1/3 of global economic growth. Okay, so they don't only have a domestic problem, we may have a problem too, because counting on China as the motor of international economic growth is going to become really difficult. The world champion in low fertility rates is South Korea. And so I will give you the very surprising answer to the reason why this is the case. It's a cultural thing discovered by an English professor not so long ago. They have the world's lowest fertility rate, about 0.7, so 1/3 of replacement rate. It's about the same rate you can find in the major Chinese cities, because life is very, very expensive in Beijing. And so the fertility rate also for couples living in the large Chinese cities is about 0.7. So 1/3 of replacement rate. And so, indeed, if you look back in time, back to the 1950s, as the graphs is starting here, you can see the global fertility rate was about 5 point something. It's been declining very rapidly, and it's a global phenomenon. There are no exceptions. So it's not only the case in developing countries, like in sub-Saharan Africa, what have you, or in Asia. It's a global phenomenon that we also see in all of the developed countries. And I'm going to argue or give you some potential explanation of why this is the case. But indeed, in due time, we're still slightly above replacement rate today, but by 2040, we would be dropping below replacement rate. And so longevity cannot increase forever. There's a biological limit to how old a human being can become. It's around 130 years. I think the oldest person ever to live to walk the earth was Jean Calment, a French lady, smoked all her life. You can see on this beautiful picture on the internet, but she's sitting in her couch, smoking like a chimney. So, as a scientist, I would say that smoking is very good for your health, but I'm not going to say this. But anyways, at some point, in 20 years or so, globally speaking, we're going to fall below global replacement rate. India, which is a school case of a country with very high fertility rates, is also now very close to replacement rate. And so indeed, if we continue in the same way as we are doing, you are in fact a species on our way to extinction. Not an opinion, it's mathematical. Once you go below 2.1, and you continue at below 2.1, at some point in time, after generations, we just disappear from the face of the Earth. Now, there are a number of classical explanations for this steep drop in the fertility rate. I think many of you will intuitively understand how it works. It has to do with urbanization, especially in developing countries. If you are living in sub-Saharan Africa and you're living in a small village of farming, there's a patriarchy. On a farm, a child can work on a farm from a very young age, and so a child tends to be seen as an asset if you're living in a rural community. Now, there's a major shift from the rural territories to the cities. The ladies, they managed to escape the patriarchy. They have access to better education, and in living in the city, they're having 5 children. If you're living in a 2-bedroom apartment, you're not an asset anymore. They become some of a liability. And so these tend to explain a major part of the drop in these fertility rates, and also, I think, well, from their perspective, a very good thing. There's the longer life expectancy. You now have live until 83 or 84 years old, depending if you're a man or woman. Newly borns today in Belgium can expect to live until the age of 100 years. So if my first grandchild was born this year, Madeleine, she has a good chance of becoming 100 years old. Now the use of contraception, what have you, secularization, become a less religious society. And so as man has abandoned God and as we start to believe has become God himself, so Homo Deus, we don't feel the urge anymore to procreate. Because in very religious societies, the fertility rates tend to be higher. But all of these explanations don't give a sufficient explanation for this drop in the fertility rates in the developed countries. And so I didn't find the answer until I stumbled on the research of an English professor. And now what I'm going to show you are just findings. I know it's a bit controversial. I'm not going to judge anybody. I'm not going to make an opinion. I'm just going to show you what she, as a lady, what she has found as the potential explanation for this drop in fertility rates in the developed world. Now, first of all, what does not seem to be the problem is that people will not want any more children. There's a very recent survey from this year from the Care of Louvain, and so they and a survey with about 2,000 childless Belgians between 18 and 45 years old. If you look just at the numbers, about 59% of them have a desire to have children. Okay? There are 13% who say, well, I don't want to have children. That's fine. And then you have 28% people saying, well, hey, I'm flexible. So, generally speaking, that doesn't seem to be the root cause of the problem. So what's going on? Now, this is what this English professor has found, is that we still want to have children, but we don't have the urge anymore to find a partner. And when they don't have the urge to find a partner, so there's too big of a cultural difference between the sexes. And so what you can see here on these graphs is a growing cultural gap between the young ladies and the young men. And so, if you look at this, remember South Korea? Lowest fertility rate in the whole world, so 0.7. It's a very strong patriarchal society. And so what the South Korean women are doing, they are basically going on sex strike. Okay? And so you can see that they are becoming, this for their political ideology, very towards the left and liberal political parties, while the men are showing the exact opposite thing. Obviously, these two trends tend to reinforce each other, because as the men get more conservative, women will find the urge to become more liberal. As women become more liberal, this will push the men to become even more conservative. This is the most extreme case that you can find in her research. It is less outspoken for the men, because you can see that it's really, they're becoming very conservative in South Korea. They're becoming a bit more conservative in other countries, but indeed for the women, they are moving to the far left side of the ideological spectrum. And again, I'm not making any comments, I'm not making any judgments, there's just an observation, but for me it will tend to close the loop. Okay? There's a cultural thing going on. This may revert at some point in time, I don't know, I think nobody knows, but at least it gives you an explanation of why also in the developed world we can see this steep drop in fertility rates. In French, there's a very beautiful saying, ce qui se ressemble s'assemble, so what resembles each other, they will come together. People now, they still create couples at a much later age, and so if you're 30 or 32, there's just less time than before to have children. Also, having a major impact on social relations is the catastrophic impact of social media, smartphones, headphones. I'm not going to lecture on this. I have my own little observatory. I just went today to Basic Fit before coming here. And so then for 1 hour, I stand on this like revolving staircase and you observe, look around me. I can see it. I've been going there for 10 years. I've been doing fitnessing for 40 years or so. I've been in many, many clubs over the past 40 years. So this is my last club, Basic Fit, in Ghent. Well, I've been there for 8 or 9 years. I basically don't know anyone. Because 9 out of 10 people are running around wearing headphones, looking at their smartphones. I don't even feel the urge to talk because, excuse me. So it's killing social contact. And it must also be playing a role in people creating couples at a later stage. Also now, older people, so like myself, are also now, I can see my own circle of friends are now, when they come at dinner, they come and sit at the table. My wife is sweating in the kitchen for 3 hours and they're playing around with their smartphones. And so I think it's a dramatic evolution. It's for me a cancer to society, a cancer for social relations. It's also one of the explanations of why we're now later in making couples. Now, this is really interesting, but I'm going to let you draw the conclusions yourself. The experiment goes back to the late 1960s, early 1970s. Have you ever heard of mouse utopia? Very interesting. This is Professor Calhoun, and he performed a biological experiment. And so he built, in some spot, he built a huge cage where he created the ideal living conditions for mice. White mice. And so this experiment, this was number 25, was repeated a number of times over a number of years. And so these mice, they were like at the Club Med, like Club Med for the mice. They were fed every day. It was always warm and cozy. They had a proper space to move. So it's like mouse heaven. Now, surprisingly, what happened, and it happened each time that they repeat the experiment, it happened all over again, is that at some point, the mice got so comfortable that they started to show very strange, and what some might consider to be decadent behavior. I'm not going to give any detail because it becomes too controversial, but they were showing decadent behavior. And so they refused to mate, They were grooming themselves all the time. You could make an analogy with people putting the images on Instagram every day. That's what mice grooming actually is at the level of people. At some point in time, they started inbreeding, they started fighting, they refused to eat, and the whole mice society collapsed upon itself. Okay, and this was repeated all over again. Now, one of the potential conclusions, I'm not saying it's the conclusion, is that when life gets too comfortable, Mother Nature has very peculiar ways to take care of a problem. The Earth is 4.3 billion years old, and so any system, biological system, that's 4.3 billion years old, will become what? By its nature. How will it take care of potential issues? After 4.3 billion years of natural evolution and natural selection, any system, you don't need the hand of God to do this for you, will become self-regulating. Like the climate system. It's also a self-regulating system. That's why we go from ice ages to global warming, to global cooling. I'm not going to go into the debate about the impact of people on the climate. That's another topic. But any system, it's a mathematical thing, will evolve towards self-regulation. And so if we get too numerous in the population, okay, we can have diseases of the body, take care of the problem. We can also have diseases of the mind to take care of the problem. This is what is suggested by Mouse Utopia. I'm going to deal with this in my 5th book that's coming out in 2 years. Also, you have to be careful, and this is a word of warning to the financial sector, with the message that we give to our young generations. Now, with this attention for the environment, for global warming, many, many great things are happening thanks to this. Cleaner air, less pollution, what have you, it's all very positive. But there's also a certain dark corner of this green thinking that is having a very negative effect on fertility rates. Now, have you ever heard of the voluntary human extinction movement? You can, basically, we can go to the website and see what you have to say. Basically, what you are saying is that men or humans are a pest to the earth. Because everywhere we come, this biodiversity goes down, we kill species, we pollute the earth, and so they see the man or humankind as a nuisance to the earth. And so they say, well, the earth will be better off without man. And so they are not proposing suicide or murder. They say, well, don't make any children anymore, and then the problem will take care of itself. Well, these are very extremist groups, but then again, you can find if you're repeating all the time all these catastrophic scenarios about the earth being scorched and going up in flames, it's creating anxious young people. There's a study I can refer to, an academic study, that tends to illustrate that young people tend to be quite anxious about the future of the earth, among other reasons for this. And so be careful what you wish for. If you're hammering too often on these catastrophic scenarios, it's having an impact on the desire of young people to have children. Because there's no bigger sign of belief in the future than having a child. And so if you are going to draw a very, very dark picture of the future, you're basically making young people anxious, and they don't make children anymore. Now, this is the part on demography, which I hope is interesting to you. Let's now talk about the impact on the economy and investing. Now, some formulas, but not too many. As you all know, even though it's a simplification, economic growth basically is driven by 2 major factors. First, and the most important one in the past, has been efficiency gains. But also, next to this, is the growth in the working population. Not the growth in the population, it's the growth in the working population. So you can see, okay, immigration is going to help us get out of this situation. Can be the case, it will surely help, but you need to have people at work. Okay? Now let's look again at the same graphs, but now instead of focus, I think standing in the way of people looking at the slide, at the screen. I will stand here for a moment. Now, instead of looking at the overall population evolution, let's look at the evolution of the labor population. Because in Belgium, even though the population is still supposed to grow, you can see at the level of the working population, you can see it's going to go downwards, about minus 18% until the turn of the century. China, a very dramatic image. You can see today the labor population in China is about 900 million, 900. It's going to drop to about 300 million. I made some own estimates. For what it's worth, I think it will go down to 250 million. Now, even though you can have artificial intelligence, we'll see what happens, robotics are going to increase productivity. If you think that this magical growth story of China is going to continue as it was over the past 50 years, it's mathematically impossible. If you have a labor population going down, being cut by 70%, even with very high productivity gains, it's going to be really difficult to keep up a high economic growth rate. A very different image you can see here is the United States, America. It's one of the very, very rare countries in the world. They can still count on growth in the working population. So compare this graph to China. Xi Jinping, this is already a bit old because this is my first presentation. Honestly, it was about 3 years or 4 years ago. Now, I did a Google search. I couldn't find any article arguing that the Chinese economy would not outgrow US economy. I think it's going to be really difficult for the Chinese to outgrow the American economy. And even if they do, the chances are it will never last for very long. So, Xi Jinping's dream about having the biggest economy in the world, I think it's going to be very difficult or very short-lived. Germany, if you wonder why Germany is not working as it used to be, of course, not only these reasons, but there are other reasons too, but one of the reasons, as you can see over here, is that Germany has a problem with a declining labor population. As you can see, it go down by 26% over the course of the century. This already started a couple of years ago, as you can see from here. Already 20 years ago, we're going down in labor population. And so, generally speaking, countries with declining populations have a hard time of growing their economy rapidly. So that's why Germany today is no longer playing the role of the economic growth engine of the Eurozone. I like the other people from KBC present. I like their economic research. It's already a bit dated, but anyways, you can see these are the economic growth forecasts for until 2040. Between 2020 and 2040 is the last bar in the graph. You can see that growth rates worldwide are declining. Yep. The United States has dropped from 3% something in the 1980 to the nillies. It's going to be growing at 1.5% over the next 20 years at constant productivity gains. Okay, so that's an assumption behind these numbers. Now, it could be the case that AI is going to save the world. Honestly, I don't know. I'm very old, but I already used ChatGPT intensively, so I do know a bit about ChatGPT. I don't know where it's going to end. What I do know is over the past 20 or 30 years, there's been major technological progress, the internet, personal computing, and what have you, but the productivity gains, the growth rate has declined to below 1%. Perhaps that AI will save the day. We will see. I don't have the answer to that question. But look at the Eurozone. I'll stand back again, is that at constant productivity gains, with the demographic image that I've just been drawing for you, you can count on an average economic growth rate over the next 20 years or so of not nearly 0.5% a year. So 0.5% a year is not very much. So it's going to be, unless you are saved by AI or some other industrial revolution, going to be really hard to have a growing economy in the Eurozone. Now, I'm not going to lecture you on Gordon Shapiro. As you all know, in the long run, Guy, you must know this, is that in the long run, earnings growth tends to be quite close to nominal GDP growth. And so with lower GDP growth, the nominal earnings growth will be lower, so be careful about too optimistic forecasts on expected returns. Government debt, as you all know, government debt and the debt to GDP ratios that you are looking at are just an illusion. The government does not keep an accounting system like a private company. The public debt is nothing else than the cumulated deficits of the past, for which the government has issued bonds to finance them. And so with these demographics at work, if you were to present the balance sheet of a country using the same standards as we are using for private companies, would also have to show the unfunded future pension liabilities and unfunded costs for healthcare. Now, there are different sources. Let's say that if you look at the debt to GDP ratio of most developed countries, if you were to add these unfunded pension and healthcare liabilities, the actual debt to GDP ratio would be between 500 and 1,200%. Okay? So this is a problem that also will take care of itself if you don't take care of it in due time. I've never been a great fan of investing in bonds, because I don't think they are a very safe asset class. It will be the fourth book coming out next year in September. And so just listen to S&P. They say, well, at unchanged policies, they believe that by 2060, about half of all global government bonds are going to have a junk bond status. So that's even a reason today why I even like bonds less than I've done over my whole adult life. So I don't like bonds, especially government bonds. If I were to be forced of investing in bonds, I would go for a high-quality portfolio of corporate bonds. Because I think that's, from some perspective, they are less risky than government bonds. Screen your portfolio for demographic risks. This realization, 3 or 4 years ago, before when I first started delving into the subject, for me was a reason to believe that the economic growth would be below consensus forecast. And so I got out of the Chinese equity market. I think I remember this because I was teaching you this in the course at ABAF a couple of years ago. Yes? Just say yes. That's fine, thank you. So I sold my Chinese equity because I said, well, there's going to be disappointment about economic growth because of this. But then I changed my opinion last year because at some point in time, I think back in February, the Chinese stock market was trading at 8.5 times earnings. Now, I thought it was a great deal, so I went back into the Chinese equity market last year in February. So basically, for me, demographics, they give me a base case scenario for a very long-term evolution. But does not stand in the way of making also tactical decisions that go beyond demographics. So just one item, among other things, and so, but indeed, they offer you a base case. So I'm still a great fan of investing in the United States. A little table, we don't have the time because time is running out, or already over time now. But I think it's one of the reasons I still prefer, even though this year I'm suffering a bit, but over the past 20 or 30 years, I've been investing about 80% of my equity portfolio in the United States for these reasons, and demographics is one of them. Thank you very much for your attention. There you go.
know you hate bonds, but I'm still going to give you a book about bonds.
Oh my God. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think there is still something else coming up. 1 second. Yes, there is. Voila. Now, this is a speech that makes us think about where we are going with the planet Earth. But before we go too much into detail of the future of the planet Earth, I would like to know what the future of the reporting is of our companies in Belgium. And therefore, I would like to start the official part of this evening, which is the Award for Best Financial Communication. And I gladly ask Luc van der Elst to the floor. Luc, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Jan. Now I know that we are racing towards extinction. I'm even more convinced of my decision to stop as a coordinator because there are other things to do in our final moments. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces, some new faces as well. This is the final part of the presentation, and it's all about our annual awards. So let's start the presentation. Go back with some facts and some figures, as we do every year. In this year's edition, we screened some 53, no, exactly 53 listed Belgian companies, as you can see. It's one more than last year. There were some new companies screened, some companies left the screening. You can see the names on the slide. Reasons for coming in or going out can be variable, but often it's a case of liquidity. Bel 20 members are always screened. That's why Montea was included this time. Also, the availability or the lack of availability of analyst capacity can be a reason. And liquidity here also certainly played a role in the exit of companies like Exmar, Greenyard and Smart Photo. The number of analysts that helped us do the screening, 49 this year, somewhat lower number than last year. We almost lost 2 teams, which is very unfortunate, and hopefully we can get them back on board next year. We lost the teams of De Belegger and Kepler-Chevreux, with one exception. And the questionnaire is still the backbone of our survey. A number of questions, 19 in total, spanning different aspects of the financial communication. All the aspects together total 500 points, half of which is going to aspects that have to do with investor relations in a broad sense. And then we also added a survey, a sector-specific survey on real estate companies. We have quite a lot of them listed on the Belgian stock market. So next to the holdings and investment companies survey and the general companies, the commercial industrial companies survey, we added a third one, which is specific for real estate companies. Then, as the title says, from factual over vertical to horizontal, what does it mean? Well, actually it means that there are different ways to come to scoring the companies. And we start with factual. Factual is everything that is, as it says, factual, not up for interpretation. And the examples that I give here are the publication delays. How long does it take for a company to publish its half-year and its full-year results? That's very clear. The dates are there, so there's no interpretation included. One analyst couldn't take care of this aspect of the financial communication, the 19 questions. Another one is the publication of the full year results. As analysts, we like to see the full year numbers broken down in semesters, and preferably see the second semester compared to the second semester of the previous years. All very factual information that can be screened, analyzed by one analyst. Then we go to the vertical, which is the more traditional way of doing the assessment. 43 analysts participated in this vertical analysis, where each analyst goes through the full questionnaire, except for the factual data. It goes through the full questionnaire and gives a score on each of the 16 remaining aspects. And then there is the third approach, which is the horizontal approach, an approach that we have been pushing and stimulating for some time. This year with more success. Let's give an example, the last one on the slide, which is the assessment of the quality of the communication on non-IFRS metrics. We asked one analyst, in this case a member of our board at EFFAS Benelux, Spatin, to go through all the companies, the general companies in our selection of companies, of 53 companies, and give a score on the non-IFRS or the alternative performance measures, as they are also often called. This, of course, has a big advantage that you can have a more coherent image of the different practices, and that, in our opinion, leads to better quality of the results. So that leads us to the awards and the sub-awards. Actually, that came a little bit too fast. Just let me say that we have this year 2 rotating awards. Rotating award is an award, a sub-award that we created a number of years ago. This year we have 2, which is for the first time. The first one is on the fastest communication on financial results, full year results and half year results. And the second rotating award is on the communication of non-IFRS metrics. Then we have 2 more traditional awards, sub-awards, the award for best investor relations and the award for best mid and small cap. And if we add everything up, we come to the overall award for best financial communication. Now we can go to the first sub-award. The award for fastest communication on financial results. So how did we proceed? We took notice of the dates when companies published their full year results and their half year results for 2025. The graph where we split 53 companies in BEL 20 and the mid and the small caps. You can see that BEL 20 companies in general need less time to publish results. The blue bars for 2024. And then for the first half 25 results, the difference is even bigger, 38 days on average for BEL 20 companies compared to 53 days on average for mid and small cap. So we added the days they needed for the publication of those 2 sets of results. And that way we came to a ranking. And so I suggest now we go to the ranking of this first sub-award. And you will see quite some ex aequos, but there is one winner, a clear winner, which is WDP, our host of tonight. I invite Alexander Makar, I think, for the first sub-award. Just let me add two things. The 4 companies with ex aequo, they are still ranked according to the number of days they needed. I think it was 58 days for Barco and something like 68 for Galapagos. So, but in the exercise, they got the same number of points. And then again, the importance of this sub-award, of course, fast communication is important because we as investors, as analysts, we want to know as fast as possible what the current status of the companies, its recent results. And of course, it's more than that. It's also a sign that the company is well organized internally and that allows management, of course, to take better investment decisions. That's why we decided this year to create this sub-award for fastest communication. Now let's go to the second sub-award of this evening. Which is the sub-award for non-IFRS metrics. Now, a colleague, board member at EFFAS Benelux has been overseeing this sub-award, going through all the communication of all companies, all general companies on non-IFRS metrics. Serge Patin was supposed to be here and present this sub-award. Unfortunately, due to very exceptional circumstances, we could say, staying with the team, non-recurring circumstances, that he was not able to be here physically, but I believe that if technology allows us that we can make connection with Serge, who will guide us through the second award of this evening.
Yeah, you should be able to hear me, Annick, if everything goes right. Okay. Thank you, Annick. Good evening to all of you. First of all, my apologies for not being able to be there physically. The reason is that the weather conditions were quite dangerous here before midday, with quite some snowfall and actually very slippery roads. So we decided to look for another solution. And thanks to Annick and the WDP technicians, we managed to succeed. Again, thanks for that. Therefore, also on my behalf, a warm welcome to our annual EFFAS Benelux Awards ceremony regarding the Belgian Awards for Best Financial Communication. I need not to emphasize again that transparent and coherent financial information remains crucial for a proper functioning of the financial markets. It also safeguards a knowledgeable analysis of the accounting numbers, and that is exactly where our awards for best financial communication situates themselves. Luc has asked me to intervene for a couple of minutes because, as you all know, each year we have the habit of highlighting a particular aspect of financial communication. And this year we went for the so-called non-IFRS metrics. That was no coincidence, but more on that later. Where does this award for non-IFRS metrics come from? It starts with boring bookkeeping, but let us immediately move to, and that already sounds a bit more ambitious, the accounting and reporting framework that is to be used by listed entities in Europe, namely EFFAS, which of course stands for the International Financial Reporting Standards. The IFRS framework is what is called principles-based, not rules-based. That was, at the time, and still is, a very conscious choice of the standard setters. Now, 2 comments on that. Users of financial statements, analysts, are obviously involved in the development of the IFRS framework. There are members of the standard setting board, the IASB, that have a user background. But it's also true that academics, auditors, entities, and many others from all over the world try to influence the developments of the standards. One could therefore argue that the reporting framework is somewhat a kind of compromise, also from a national versus international perspective, meaning that what works for the Canadians not necessarily works for the Japanese and vice versa. That said, I strongly disagree with the word compromise because the word compromise has such a negative meaning and that doesn't apply here. But it is true that the framework is not always what financial analysts want or would prefer in terms of financial reporting. And it is true that from an analyst perspective, the standards could use a little bit of refreshing there, here and there, knowing that in the real world, that is obviously not always possible. Just to give one example, I can't resist mentioning that we at EFFAS have been pushing for quite a while for a redesign of the IFRS 8 standard on segment reporting. We have been doing this for quite some time, and the latest rumors suggest that this might be worked out sometime in the future. Fortunately, there's a flip side to this coin. The framework is principles-based, and that means that entities are allowed to tell their own story. They are in principle allowed to present their accounting numbers in the way that is best for them. This jeopardizes comparability, of course, as entities, even those belonging to the same sector, tend to present their numbers differently. But, and that is the advantage, the analyst gets, on the other hand, numbers that reflect the company's story. If you ask me, the benefits of this approach clearly outweigh the drawbacks. And this is also true when the financial performance is considered. Companies also come up with alternatives, so-called non-IFRS metrics, to explain better, if you want, their actual or real performance. One of the catchwords here is the management view. Indeed, the entity should be allowed, is allowed, to portray its performance as estimated and as looked at by the management itself. Now, cynical analysts will now argue that the alternative non-IFRS performance is always better than the reported performance based on the IFRS framework. But that is something that you can try to clarify over a drink later tonight. Next question. Do entities make use of this opportunity, that is, to present their performance alternatively? And the answer to that question is absolutely, as shown, by the way, on the slide. The vast majority of the entities that we screened publish so-called APMs, or alternative performance measures. We decided this year to focus on non-IFRS metrics, on APMs, as virtually all companies call them. And I already hinted that was no coincidence, because we cannot neglect, namely, the new standard IFRS 18 that is coming. IFRS 18 is mainly about targeted improvements to the primary financial statements, the P&L statement in particular, but also introduces so-called MPMs, management-defined performance measures. Of course, all listed entities that we screened know that IFRS 18 becomes applicable about 2 years from now, and are assessing at present the impact that the standard will have on the way they present, or will have to present, in particular, their performance. As said, the ISB has worked out something regarding the management-defined performance measures, but has kept the approach rather limited, if you ask me. MPMs are only subtotals of P&L, communicated in public communications outside the financial statements, and communicate management's view of the financial performance. IFRS 18 is still being assessed, and only today I discovered a paper published by a prominent UK analyst standard setter who advocated, amongst others, for the introduction of cash flow-based MPMs. Just to say, we are not there yet. There is more to come, especially as the IASB is currently revising the cash flow statement. So who knows, this story isn't over yet. Nonetheless, one could argue that our award for best non-IFRS metrics anticipates a little bit, or more or less, what will be a requirement for Belgian entities a few years from now. What we were looking for during our screening is summarized on the slide. Is the analyst able to understand the non-IFRS metrics, the APMs, and are they communicated in a transparent and a coherent manner? The question to be resolved was who communicates best regarding its APMs, which entity is most transparent, clearly defines its APMs, explains its APMs, reconciles them to the closest IFRS numbers, and explains any adjustments. And also, do the APMs in some way or another also add some value for the financial analyst? We discovered a few positive things. As already said, most entities use APMs to explain their performance better. Most entities use various APMs but do not limit themselves to the income statement. Some entities are pretty creative in the way of presenting things. One company, to give one example, one company linked its APMs to its operating segments, non-IFRS metrics per segment, wow, or decomposed its APMs based on various other parameters. Again, wow, well done. But we also discovered that there is still some work to do. Just to give one example, sometimes the APM information referred to boilerplate adjustments, impairment, restructurings, capital gains and losses, non-recurring items, too obvious adjustments, so to speak, not adding a lot of value. Other costs and income, what is being corrected for, not always well explained. Also, the management view was not always well explained. Alternative often simply stands for adjusted EBITDA, EBIT, gross profit, whatever, and referring to the extraordinary items. But in our view, APMs ought to be more than that. Also, the presentation was sometimes a bit of a drawback. The information was often a bit everywhere. Just to give one example, two examples. In the glossary was explained what alternative or adjust exactly meant, and then we had to find all kind of adjusted numbers about everywhere in the report. So in terms of presentation, that wasn't the nicest example. Context and interpretation was also very often an issue. Context and interpretation of the APMs was often all the way at the back of the annual report, as if the man or woman responsible for the annual report at the very end thought, oh yes, we forgot something, the APMs. That didn't give a good impression. And as an analyst, you want to get the message that the alternative performance measures are part of a good financial communication. Okay, this was a short background to our award for non-IFRS metrics. And with that in mind, I hand over to Luc, whom I would like to thank once again for his 20 years of excellent dedication, and Annick, as it is time to announce the winner.
Okay, thank you very much, Serge. I'm glad that he was still able to tell his story personally. I think he put a lot of effort in going through all the communications of all the companies on the non-IFRS metrics. So let's now proceed to the rankings for this second sub-award. We have again some ex aequos, but also a clear winner, and that is Bekaert. And I think we have Dries van Hamme and a colleague also to join us. Well done. It's been a while since Bekaert was seen on top of some of the rankings. And I can also tell you that I have the half-year report in front of me. You're welcome. Sorry, I cannot show it on the screens, but the half-year report of Bekaert in front of me with, in note 14, the alternative performance measures over 2 pages, each time well-defined, also with the reason for use, and then somewhat further in the report, the reconciliation tables for all of the metrics used, not only for the first half of 25, but also for the full year 24 and the first half of 24. So that is best practice, the best practice I could find, I could mention. Well done. Okay, now let's go to the third award of this evening. An award that is a traditional award and of interest for many of you here in the room, active in investor relations. Before showing the rankings, let me tell you that in this year's edition, we doubled the weight of the category. We doubled the weight from 125 to 250 points on the total of 500. How did we do that? By giving more weight to each of the sub-aspects, like the availability and the helpfulness of the investor relations team, the possibilities that we as analysts are offered to have contact with senior management, the non-financial press releases, and gathering of the consensus numbers. But we also added a number of extra aspects that were before also part of the questionnaire, but put in a different category, the category of forward-looking information. Here we are talking about publication delays, strategic updates like when capital market days are organized, and also the intermediary communication on the results like the guidance and quarterly results or profit warnings. All have been included in this year's category of investor relations. So let's have the rankings for Best Investor Relations 2025. We have the rankings for BEL 20 and for the mid and the small caps. BEL 20 top is Solvay. And for mid and small caps, the top is Shurgard, but with the same number of points. So we have an ex aequo with Solvay and Shurgard equally winning the 2025 award for Best Investor Relations. We have Geoffroy Doutremont from Investor Relations Solvay. And we have, if I believe, Mr. Brunet from Shurgard, CFO. Well done. Finance Director, sorry. Well done. And we can then immediately go to the second traditional sub-award, which is the award for Best Mid and Small Cap. So everything outside BEL 20. And here we have the rankings. And Shurgard. I must say that Shurgard and Solvay have been doing extremely well in the past 2 years especially. So we can find them regularly on top of the different awards and sub-awards. But because you have done a very great job. Then that leaves us with the overall award for Best Financial Communication, putting everything together. And then we have the rankings. Small and mid caps in the top 5. Proximus also small mid cap. Solvay. But the winner is Shurgard with the highest score. But as has become quite common, you know, there is this rule that if you have won the overall award in the past 3 years, you're not eligible for winning it in the current edition. Solvay has been a regular winner of the overall award for many times, but last time was 4 years ago. So that's why this year's overall award goes again to Solvay. Geoffroy, very well done. Okay. Short word, yeah, you say.
Yes. Thank you very much. Really a great pleasure to win that. Congratulations to Shurgard. I guess be back next year and maybe. Thank you very much to the EFFAS Benelux and to Luc, indeed for so many years being there to do that, to support that ranking is very important for all the listed companies. Thank you, obviously, on our side, on my side, to the investor relation team. Charlotte is there today. Vincent is based in Lyon, so could not be there today. But also thanks a lot to our management, the CEO, Philippe Keren, and the CFO, Alexandre Blum. Since the split of the company 2 years ago, a lot has changed at Solvay. So we had to restart a lot as well, to relearn a lot to our management, to our teams. The finance team also is new, so very, very nice recognition today for all the hard work they've been doing since 2 years. Also very happy to see it's possible to win the prize while the financial markets are not very supportive for a now mid-cap company in the chemical European industry. These are 4 words: mid-cap European chemical industry, 4 words that are not very attractive for the financial market today. But still, we are trying, I guess, to be transparent in our communication, to be available, to be consistent as well in what we do year after year, and innovative also, try to bring new elements when we can. So thank you very much once again to EFFAS, and see you next year at Solvay.
Thank you, so far. Okay, a few things left to say and to do. The members of the Belgian Investor Relations Society are entitled to an individual report with a lot more information, not at least individual comments by the analysts who participated in the survey, with appreciations and also suggestions for improvement, if there is any margin for improvement. So those reports, you can expect them in the coming days, maybe even before the end of the week. Looking at Annick. And then also we would like to do a small lottery because we really are thankful for all the analysts who help us every year again and again to make this possible, to make this happen. So we have a few extra bottles of champagne that we would like to hand out. We have, I think, 2 lots of 6 bottles that we would like to present to one of the analysts present in the room. Okay. I don't know if my hands are innocent, but I'll do it anyway. So the first box goes to, if he's or she is present here, Francesca Ferragina. Congratulations, and we'll make sure that you can take the bottles home later this evening. The second one. Okay. The second one, if present, it's again a woman. It's Lynn Houtekete. Is Lynn here? Ah, sorry, you're hiding that. Okay, congratulations. You two were a very big help this year, so thank you very much. Okay, Hans, I give back to you to wrap it up.
I don't need that. I need the mic.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the official part, so we are moving into the reception part. And that means that we also have a very, very big thank you. A very big thank you, first of all, to all the people of VDP who helped us doing this and hosting us here. It means from the people from Solvay that they know that next year you will be the host, which is an important part. But you're not the only sponsor, an important sponsor, but we also have a sponsor every year, which is Belier, is the investor relation organization, also mentioned, of course, here. We have Fabelfin Academy that helps us as well, because next to the lottery of the 6 bottles of champagnes, all the analysts that help us during the year in organizing this and doing all the analysis are also rewarded by 1 bottle of champagne. But it is very, very important that we can use these people, because if we would not have the analysts necessary, because the rule, I don't think you told it this year, Luc, the rule is normally every company should be looked upon by at least 3 analysts, which means that we want to have an as independent view as possible. And that is not always very easy to do so. Thank you also very much to Annick and the team of EFFAS in Benelux. Thank you to all the people being here. Thank you to the people for the technical capabilities, because that is always a little bit exciting. Is it going to work? Are we going to have Serge or not on the screen? But the answer is yes. And we invented an award with the Belgian Association for Financial Analysts, EFFAS Benelux, let's say, reward. It's a lifetime reward, and now you can guess to who we're going to give this reward. For somebody that we know very well that has been organizing this for 20 years on a row. We had a speech about the extinction of the human species, but one thing is for sure, we have already taken into account that next year Luc has a successor, and Thomas is hiding himself somewhere, and Luc promised that he will still help his successor to make sure that the awards for best financial communication go into the right direction. May I ask Luc to the floor, and a very warm applause for this life achievement.
Oh. Dank u wel. Zelf het meegeven nu. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, and I think we may be ready for a drink and something to eat right now.